Okay, so all I've done is install Nginx and modify the default Nginx site a little bit. You can visit this server now in a browser, just the server's IP. Load the page and you should see the Nginx welcome markup. So I've just modified that a little bit, and this is our quote-unquote web application. So this is a stand-in right now for something more complex, obviously. Because more complex web applications require more complex AWS setups, we're not going to be covering it in this first part. So that will come, but just not right now. So let's focus on some of the plumbing around making this highly available and scalable. So go back to your EC2 dashboard, and what we're going to do is stop this instance. It'll be faster if you stop it. You can do this to a running instance, but we're just not going to. So we're going to go ahead and stop that instance. It's warning you that if you have instance storage, that is the ephemeral instance storage, which is like your temp directory on Linux, that will be gone when this server goes down. So let's go ahead and stop the server. This is stopping. It'll take a minute, but you can see we've already disconnected here. So broken pipe, the other end hung up. When this is stopped, what we're going to do is, under image, we're going to select create image. What this will do is, just like we installed this instance, or booted this instance from an image, which was that AMI, that Amazon machine image, what we're going to do is create a new AMI, or Amazon machine image, from this dev server. So this will sort of be like the golden image version of doing things. So what we're going to do is say tutorial Linux AWS app server v1. This is our version 1 golden image. We're going to leave the default volume that backs this as 8 gigs of general purpose SSD, and it is persistent, and it will be deleted on termination. Okay? If you're doing something super critical where even if the instance has to go away, you still want to keep the data that it's been working on, you definitely want to uncheck this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create that image, and this will take a while. So you can see that this is being snapshotted right now. If you go to the Elastic Block Store or EBS snapshots dashboard, this will be pending, and this will take a while. So I'll come back when it's done and we've got our AMI, and I'll show you how to use that. Okay, so our snapshot has been completed. We should now have an AMI that is ours personally. So we'll switch from public images to owned by me, and we'll get rid of that search that we performed earlier. And you can see here I've got an AMI named, well, whatever I named it, version 1 of the tutorial Linux AWS app server. So it's got an AMI ID, which is quite lovely. And we can now use this to spawn further instances that already have our application code, which is this website, on them. So let's talk about the next step here, creating an AutoScaling group. Now, what's an AutoScaling group? You can find it just down here. If you scroll down in your EC2 dashboard, you'll find it down under AutoScaling. There's 2 entries here, Launch Configurations and AutoScaling Groups. An AutoScaling group is a sort of logical or automation layer on top of a type of instance that you want to have more than one of. For example, we have a web instance. If we have a predictable cycle and we need to be ready for, let's say, in the evenings, people access our site, so that's when we get hit with 100 times of our base traffic load. We need to be able to scale up for the evenings and then scale down when that traffic load disappears. This is one of the true value adds that like cloud computing and this kind of stuff really bring, because almost everywhere else the cloud solution is going to be more expensive, and not just by a little bit, but like order of magnitude more expensive for VMs, for databases, for networking stuff, for traffic. It's vastly more expensive to do cloud services for all this stuff. But if you've got an app that needs to scale order of magnitude larger or smaller, like if you're Netflix, this is great. If you're a news site that everyone pings it as soon as they get out of work, that's great. That's where the cloud stuff really wins in a way. It's a lot easier to scale down here than it is with physical infrastructure in a data center, obviously, or more realistically, other VM providers or other managed physical hardware providers. Okay, so auto-scaling. You can scale up, you can scale down. You can scale based on a couple different things. You'll want to enable CloudWatch monitoring on your instances. It's an extra charge, so I'm not really showing it here, but you would enable that, and then you would make this thing scale based on CPU usage or some other like memory usage, some bottleneck that your app experiences, the first one that it hits. Let's talk about setting this up. You've got these auto-scaling groups, and what they basically do is launch off a bunch of EC2 instances, and they do that by using something called a launch configuration. And that's a configuration for how you want these EC2 instances to start up. So why don't we create an auto-scaling group, and that will actually go ahead and make us create a launch group. So the first thing is creating a launch config here. I'm going to go ahead and create that. This is why the wizard is nice, right? When you're new to this, because otherwise you'd be like, oh, I want an auto-scaling group, and you'd figure out the API call for it, and you do it, and it would be like, okay, now I need this other thing. It depends on a launch configuration. And there's a lot more like weaseling your way around in the documentation and sort of hoping that you're not missing anything or doing something wrong. The wizard is a nice way to kind of figure out how all of this works together, because it certainly is not intuitive. So click over to My AMIs. We've got one of our own AMIs now, this image we just created, so you can go ahead and select that. We're again going to use T2 micros for this, because I don't intend on spending a lot of money. And we're going to go ahead and configure the details for this instance. I do recommend you open this Advanced Details tab. I'll show you what's in there in a minute. So the name for this launch configuration, not the instance, but the launch configuration itself, is going to be Tutorial Linux v1. When you have a new version of your application, you're going to create a new launch configuration that points to the new AMI, the newer version of your application. If you're going to be scaling based on certain metrics, you're going to want to enable detailed monitoring, the CloudWatch monitoring, which is Amazon's monitoring service. The advanced details, the user data is really an interesting and very useful thing. If, for example, your application developers have not created a system service, or there's some kind of thing that needs to be run on the server so that it can come up and do its thing, this is where you do that. So if you, for example, have a script that starts your services and passes in some configuration data, this is where you might do that. If you have all of your application servers do a git checkout before they run, you might do that here. So you could say cd, my app, and then you would do like a git pull, and then you would, start app, or you could do something like start your app using whatever init system you're using or service management system you're using. So here is a way for you to kind of give these instances a way to kind of bootstrap themselves when they are launched as part of this auto-scaling group. We don't need to do that right now, so I'm just going to remove that. And that's really all we need here is a name for this launch config. The storage, we're going to leave the default 8 gigs since we have literally like 1 kilobyte of application in our static website. It's fine. Now we're going to configure a security group for this auto-scaling group. We'll call it better longer than shorter. Tutorial Linux app server ASG set group v1. And we're going to allow HTTP and SSH. We still are going to allow SSH because we do want to get into the instances possibly. You do not have to enable this if your instances never need anyone to log into them. So this is fine. If you didn't see, you can create a custom TCP rule. So if you have like a dev server that you're playing around with and it's listening on port 8080 or something, that's fine. You can just put in TCP 8080 from anywhere or a custom IP or whatever, and that'll be fine. Let's go ahead and review that. Nope, need to delete that. So here we can go ahead and review our launch config. You can see the instance type we're launching on, anything else that we just set. We don't have any user data because I deleted that before saving. The storage is the default, and our security group is the one we just created. Here are the rules for review. So again, we're going to choose an existing key pair now because we already created that one. And we're going to select the only one in this dropdown. It's the only one that exists over here in this Oregon region. And I'm going to say, yes, I really do have that key, so I can log in. And we're going to go ahead and create this launch config. Now, you can create as many launch configs as you want, and you'll generally create one for each version of your app you launch. Now, we can create an auto-scaling group, ASG. We're going to start with 3 little instances. We're going to leave this as the default network. This is where you would choose, hey, I want this running in my production network, for example. We'll launch all of our instances in 2C, US West 2C. This is just telling us that we have selected the default for the subnet, which is that each of these instances will have their own public IP address. So we're going to select the simple version here, but if you're actually scaling up and down, what you would say is please scale between 3 and your max, so like 10 or whatever instances, so min and max size based on load, and you would configure the actions or alarms that trigger scaling. So for example, if you've defined an alarm, which you can add here, like memory exhausted or memory above 90 for more than a couple minutes, 90%, you can add X instances. Does that make sense? And then again, to scale back down, if let's say memory is below 50 for more than 10 minutes, well, it's probably safe to remove a few, so we can remove, let's say, 1 instance. So this will step up and gradually step down your instances. There's a whole methodology to doing this based on how fast you expect to need to scale. We're not getting into that now, so we're just going to keep this group at its initial size. We don't need or care about notifications, although that is something you would set up in production. And then we're going to just give it a name key, and we'll just call this app server, all lowercase, so that we know that these are ASG app servers. We call it ASG app server. So that we'll have 3 instances with this name in there. Okay, let's review that, and we'll be done. So group size of 3, both min and max. We're not scaling up or down here. And we're going to go ahead and create this group. You can see the AutoScaling group we just created.